Welcome to the Creator's Journey with the Halfling and the Spaceman. We love talking to creators about their journeys, and today we are excited to have with us Dave Butler. Dave is a speculative fiction writer whose novel Witchy Kingdom won the Dragon Award as well as some other awards for Best Alternative History in 2020. And he's written several other novels. And in addition, in January of 2025, he became the senior editor for Ark Press. Welcome, Dave.
Oh, thank you, Jan and Roger, for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, we appreciate it, and we're very excited to have you. We're looking forward to a nice little conversation. Sometimes I feel like when I'm trying to schedule people, it's like herding cats.
Speaking of which, there's a cat here on the floor keeping us
Yeah.
company.
Oh, nice.
You didn't have to point her out. She's
Well, she's
not
off
visible,
camera right now,
but
but she'll
that's
visit us eventually.
she last person that we talked to, she actually came up behind Roger and climbed up over the top of the chair onto his shoulder and climbed up over the shoulder and jumped down. Never happened before. She's never done anything like that before, so that was kind of freaky. Maybe she'll behave herself this time. We'll
Fun.
see. But anyway, uh, so let's go ahead and get started. Dave, tell us just a little bit about yourself and what made you choose writing for this creative outlet?
Yeah, but that's an interesting question. A little bit about me. I'm from Utah. I'm in Utah right now. I've lived here about half my life. I'm married. I have 3 kids. My oldest, my son, just got married, and 2 dogs. I play guitar, a little bit of banjo, and hang out with my kids whenever I can. By profession, a lot of writers you read writers' biographies and it will say he drove a truck, he was a short order cook, he did 2 tours in Vietnam, right? I was always struck as
Yeah.
a kid that writers had these backgrounds where they did grab bags of stuff. I have
Mhm.
2. So, I'm actually admitted to the bar in New York State. I was a practicing lawyer for, 12 years. I've been a corporate trainer for over a decade. I've started, businesses and folded businesses. I do corporate training still. I do, freelance editing. I edit for, Ark Press. I actually partial owner in a very small kind of boutique nonfiction publisher, and I principally see myself as a writer, and I have since I was 7 or 8 years old. And I don't know, to be honest, I never felt like it. I chose it. I never looked at like a menu of things and said, "What of these things do I want?" It chose me. I felt like when I was 7 or so and I read The Lord of the Rings and I thought from then on, this is what I am going to do.
Mm.
Um, and but you gotta make a living, so you do other stuff, along the way and while you work at it.
So you didn't choose the life of a writer, the life of a writer chose you, right?
Yeah, I think that's right, and there's this interview with, oh, shoot, what's his name? Um, oh, man, I'm totally blanking on his name, but, it'll come to me in, like, 5 minutes. He said, "The writer's life is for those who can endure it." Um,
Mm.
and, that's been my experience, living sort of with irregular paychecks, trying to make money other ways, you know, trying to sort of figure out how to slowly find an audience over time. Yeah, I think I didn't really choose to be a writer. I discovered I was when I was 7 and, slowly figured out how to do it,
Mhm.
you know,
Sounds a little bit like being a podcaster.
probably very similar, Roger.
Well, it's always, no matter what your creative outlook is, it's always gonna be that whatever it is you're doing, it's a work in progress. You're a work in progress. So that's just the reality, right? If you ever think that you are the best that you can be, then you may as well just give up on life because, you can always be better.
Sure.
At
All right.
least that's my
All
opinion.
right. Well, I'll
Anyway,
promise I'll finish this show first.
okay.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Dave,
the
we always talk to folks. And we're really interested in not only what creative thing they're doing now, but what was their earliest fan love? What was the thing that sparked you and started this drive of yours to write?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna sound very cliched, but it was Tolkien. My when I was 7, my dad was gone for, better part of a week for an academic conference, and he brought everybody a present when he came home, and he brought me the 25th anniversary Silver Jubilee edition of The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings in a gold foil box with, the Darrell K. Sweet covers. Right, The Hobbit was yellow, The Fellowship blue, the Two Towers green, and The Return of the King was red. I remember very clearly. They've fallen apart long since. They don't exist anymore, but I read them many times, and I read them first when I
mm,
was 7 or 8. Just lay down in bed and read them, and it was that. And for a long time, I sort of looked for that same thing again and again. I think a lot of people did, including a lot of writers in the 60s and 70s and 80s were trying to recreate Tolkien. A lot of writers got their start basically with book one. Terry Brooks is a prominent example where book one is just a pretty obvious piece of Tolkien fan fiction. And then Lester Del Rey kind of beat him up a little bit and uh, made him find his own thing for Elfstones of Shannara, which is really kind of the first book one. Sword of Shannara is a Tolkien retread to the point of having even the same names of some of the characters that Tolkien did. And I was that way. I was looking for Tolkien. I remember other sort of things that I discovered on the way that ultimately contributed to my sense of aesthetic, though. A big one was the Moomin trolls. I don't know if you know the Moomin trolls. I'm going to forget who did this. This is
mhm.
a these are it's a Scandinavian. Moomin is Moomin, and it's this long running cartoon, sort of fantasy, whimsical fantasy about these trolls. And the public library in Ithaca, New York had them, and I read those. And I very early on read um, Tim Powers' early novel, The Drawing of the Dark, which is, I don't know if you know this. Do you know The Drawing of the Dark?
No,
Oh, it's
no.
such a
No,
fantastic book.
we're sheltered.
So The Drawing of the Dark is about it's set in the Siege of Vienna. So what is that, 1643? And
Yeah.
the main character is Brian Duffy. He's an Irish mercenary. And the Suleiman the Great is besieging the walls and things are getting hairy. And there's this crazy engineer who keeps trying to draw him in and hire him to protect as things are getting, in a besieged city. People sort of go at each other's throats and start robbing each other for food. Things get bad, and he gets hired to protect this brewery, the Herzenvest brewery. Um, and it turns out that the crazy old gunnery engineer is Merlin, and Brian Duffy, is the current reincarnation of King Arthur. And in fact, he and Arthur were both the reincarnation of some lost uh, first great cult. We've forgotten the name, but he's constantly reincarnating as the great culture hero of the West. And what is inside the Herzenvest brewery is there is a vat of beer which is built over the tomb, like on the bones of this culture hero. And and there's a beer that has to brew for 800 years. And when the beer, the Herzenvest Dark, is to be drawn, right, is the great moment of crisis for the West. If it can be successfully drawn, the West will continue, and if not, the West falls. And Suleiman is there to destroy the West and to prevent the drawing of the Dark. And Brian Duffy has reincarnated to defend the drawing of this beer. And I read this book and this is crazy, and I love it. Right? This is
Oh, wow.
so nutty, but it's like it's real history, and it's also kind of real mythology, and so Tim was. I was a big early fan of Tim. One of the great delights of my editorial career is getting to edit him. One of his, not his most recent, but 2 novels ago, his book My Brother's Keeper. Um, I got to edit, which was fantastic.
Oh,
So
fun.
yeah, but also like an early sort of eccentric, like Dave likes something somewhat out of the mainstream, maybe, was long after everybody else had read it and then forgotten and it sort of disappeared out of the mainstream of the culture. I somehow found and fell in love with Mervyn Peake's Gormenghast trilogy, which properly speaking aren't really fantasy at all. They're gothic novels. But they have these grotesque Dickensian characters sort of stalking each other, trying to murder each other in this crumbling huge castle, which is totally bound by ritual and on the verge of imploding. And yeah, those are some of like those are some of the early pieces that by my teens I'd read this stuff. I'd read Clark and Asimov, and I read the cyberpunk stuff when it came out, and that's cool. I liked it when it was cool, right?
Yeah.
But these other pieces are things that I read, and they're really stuck with me.
Well, now that leads me to a question, which I mean, obviously, if your father gifted you at the ripe old age of 7 with the with Tolkien, obviously he must have supported your interest in fantasy and so forth. So, I mean, I guess that's a pretty safe bet, but what about, like, when you were in school, when you were going through school, did you have friends that were into the same types of fandom, or did everybody just think you were the weird kid, or did they kind of, if they didn't really understand it, they at least supported you in it?
Yeah, yeah, my parents supported me in reading. I when I was in kindergarten, I read the Hardy Boys books, and I told the kindergarten teacher that I had read them, and she accused me to my parents of lying. So
Yeah.
I was a pretty precocious reader.
Mhm.
My parents absolutely supported me. What they did, I remember for my reading of The Hobbit, my dad read it like a chapter ahead of me and gave me vocabulary words. He wanted me to look up words. I remember looking up the word flummoxed from chapter 1 of The Hobbit, right? Um, and there was a deal, as long as I think into high school, where if I would, maybe it didn't last that long, but for a number of years, I would read. I think the deal was if I read 3 books and did a 100-word book report of each, that they would buy me another book. So I'd
Oh, wow.
read books in the library and, I wasn't very strategic about it. I should have been smart. I should have been, like, reading short books in the library and, like, getting big books. But I did, accumulate something of a library this way. My, my teen years were, young viewers may not believe this was a real thing, but there was a time which we call the Satanic Panic, and, my teen years happened during the panic. And
Mhm.
so I sort of, I got introduced to role-playing games, but for years didn't have the money to actually own them. So I had dice and just kinda make it up on the fly, which is what you're doing anyway. I just didn't really have rules. And this was a thing I did socially through junior high and high school and college. And actually, by the way, one of the great delights of my life is some of the guys I gamed with as early as sixth grade, I am still gaming with. Or I should say, I'm gaming with them again, and now with some of my kids and their kids. It wasn't a thing I sought. I moved away, I moved back, they moved away, they moved back. Here we are. It's been great. So, this did not endear me to their parents, though. There were some parents for whom I was the bad kid,
Oh.
and or the one to watch, and, you guys can hang out, but no sleepovers because you might play Dungeons and Dragons. And so you can in the afternoon, why don't you play a nice board game in the down in the family room where everybody can see you as the friend I was allowed to be. Um,
Oh, wow.
so yeah, in terms of, like, literature, I don't think anyone cared one way or the other. I wrote short stories and a terrible novel in high school. I was in, mostly wrote short stories because I was in creative writing classes or I
Mhm.
had units in school. I know people who compulsively wrote short stories or novels on their own. I didn't do that. I wrote one novel. Um and, when I could choose, I remember every year in English, we got to read one book of our choice,
Mhm.
and, and I didn't actually choose fantasy novels. I think I was trying to show off. I remember one year, I think in my junior year, I chose the Divine Comedy, and in my senior year, I chose the Quran. So, I think I was trying to be like, "Look at me, I'm a smart kid," right? So,
Ah,
what I should have done is, read a nice fantasy novel, but I didn't. So, yeah, no one it was not a problem that I read sci-fi or fantasy. The sort of other kinda aspects of it were a little dodgy.
You've talked a little bit about your background as far as, the things that kinda got you on that. Let's talk about how your fandom and your love of these things currently drives your writing.
Yeah. Meaning meaning, like, the connection between what I like from other people and what I write? Is that
Yes,
how
the
the question
things that you
is?
love, how do the things that you love drive what you create now?
Yeah. That's a good question. So, I, I've been on panels where, I was on a panel at 20 books to 50K, and one of the questions I think it was about writing history or something, writing alternate history, and one of the questions from the audience was, um, "At what, reading level do you target your book?" And they asked at the other end of the panel, and he said, "Oh, 8th grade. Oh, yeah, 8th grade, 8th grade." I said, "Are you kidding? No, I don't write for 8th graders. I write for me." And I hope that there are people who can keep up, right? So, I, uh my books are full of music because I love music.
Mhm.
My Witchy War, epic fantasy series has an album's worth of songs in every book, and they are songs. They're not just poems I wrote, they're lyrics with melodies and chord structures, and I have recorded about half of them. I meant to record them all as albums. I did the first one, and then I've fallen behind. Although I really need to do some catching up on that actually this weekend. I love languages, and so the books are full of language. Again, the Witchy War series has untranslated German and Dutch and French and Latin and Hebrew and Greek and even Ojibwe in it because those are things I love. Like fundamentally, writing is an art, is a craft you perform with your whole soul. And if I'm only allowed to put like a bit of me into the book, then it's not a very interesting book to me, right? Every book in some sense is kind of has my whole soul in it. And so it's not um it's not impossible that you'll look in the books I write and see echoes of earlier books. That's the nature of literature, right? The enterprise of literature is books talking to each other. It's a one-way conversation. There's no going back in time, but the books still exist and they're talking to each other in a dialogue over, the great themes. Um, uh, but I believe that the books that I write feel like Dave books, that there is me in them, that my interest, my sense of humor, um, I think my interest in anthropology and history and religion and and mythological symbolism all feed into everything that I write.
Well, I think that that's probably well, I was gonna say I think that's probably true of most writers, but not necessarily because I've heard some writers say that the best piece of advice they've gotten is to get out of your comfort zone and, write something that you wouldn't necessarily, if you like fantasy, maybe try you know, writing some horror or something like that. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not a writer, so I can't speak to speak to the validity of that advice, but, that's something that we've heard. But then we've also heard I think it's something that more often we hear, "Write what you know," which, I mean,
Yeah,
what do you know better than yourself? I mean,
yeah.
so
Well, see, I don't want to argue, but that's not quite what I'm saying. There's a wonderful quote. I think it was, man, I forget, Frederick Pohl or somebody said, "Write what you know is the worst writing advice ever. This is why we have so many novels about English teachers contemplating adultery." Okay. Um, and I'm
Okay.
not saying that you need to stick to a certain genre. I've written thrillers, I've written books for kids, right? I've written young adult science fiction, I've written adult science fiction, I've written fantasy, urban contemporary fantasy, I've written early modern fantasy, I've written ancient secondary world. I've written a lot of stuff, right? I've written nonfiction. So it's not about a comfort zone. My point is that the books are inevitably full of the things I love. If they're not, then they're full of things I don't love. Then they're
Mhm.
full of things that are crap, right? And there are people who do write like that. It's people who only write for money. If you only write for money and you say, "What is gonna make me the most money?" and you conclude it's not a thing you love, that it's something else, and you put that something else in. You write for an audience you don't care about. You tell a story that you don't care about because it will pay you, right? That you put in themes that you don't care about, but you think, this is how I make money. And then you end up with, and I know that we're not allowed to talk like sailors here, but you end up with books that are inferior in quality and that have a mercenary character. And I don't think that those books exist, and they are rarely literature. They're mostly just trash. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that.
It's funny when we were talking about writing what you know. I was thinking,
Yeah.
if that's the case, then these romantasy authors have to live some pretty interesting and very
Very,
spicy
very
lives.
torrid. Right. Lots of ripped bodices lying around the floor of their, sailing ship they live on.
Pardon me while I woo this dragon.
Yes. This seems likely, Roger. I think that's probably
Uh.
correct.
Well, Dave, tell us what you're currently working on, or if you can.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't actually know right now. I'll tell you why I don't know and what some of the possibilities are. I just got the rights back to a book of mine that I published that got almost no attention. So I published it um, in an indie publisher owned by a friend of mine. He's a close enough friend of mine that I performed his wedding. When he got married,
Ooh.
I went and paid the state $25, got licensed, and did the wedding thing in my best suit. Okay, right before COVID, like the January just before COVID blew over and shut everything down.
Mm.
And his publishing company is sort of winding up, so giving back the rights. So if I can find a publisher for that quickly, which I might, then the answer is I'm going to write a sequel. I have a here's the deal. I have a writing retreat in September. So I have like 5 days in which I have nothing to do but write for
Mhm.
16 hours a day. So I'm going to produce 50,000 words of something. So it might be I produce a sequel to this book, which be great. So this is it's kind of Longmire. You know the TV series Longmire, a sheriff in a rural Wyoming county, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's kind of Longmire, but if the protagonist was Nancy Drew. So it's about a just very smart young woman who is technically in high school, but finishing college online, running the her dad's business, with which is a bowling alley in the front and a small town law practice in the back. And she gets caught up in this um, in a thriller. She gets caught up in this kind of escalating cycle of violence around the reading of a will of a local guy who's just died. Okay, so it's a legal thriller, but it's like a rural Nancy Drew kind of legal thriller. Anyway, it's a great story. Almost almost zero attention, just kind of disappeared. People, it's in the other books by Dave category. So I may, if we get a publisher here in the next few weeks, I will write a sequel. If not, the sort of plan B is I have an unpublished novel called The Tarantula Thief, which is um, which is very cool. So this is a middle grade novel. Um, the main character is sort of is based on my son, my experience with my son when he was that age. He just got married, so he's 22 now, but he in second grade uh or first grade, I guess. We had to take him out because we had to remove him from the school system because the school system was stupid. Okay. So so so
What
they
a
called us in.
surprise.
Yeah, shocking, right? Let me tell you a story. They call us in one day. They say, "Your son's in trouble. Come talk to the principal." Like, okay. So we go and sit down, right? He's 6. Okay. So we sit down, there's like the principal and there's the teacher and it's me and my wife. And they say, William got in trouble. He's in trouble for violating the no tolerance towards violence policy. And we say, well, that seems really odd. He's not a violent kid. And they say, yeah, well, he in the playground yesterday would not stop talking about a very violent video game. I said, again, that seems odd. We know exactly what games he plays. We play them with him. What very violent video game was he talking about? And they said, well, he he wouldn't stop talking about a video game where you punch people and they break into pieces. I said, you're talking about We Lego Batman, right? That is the game we are talking about. My son is excited about We Lego Batman, and therefore he got in trouble. And they said, yeah, well, when the parent monitor told him to stop talking, instead of stopping talking, he just kept trying to explain it was We Lego Batman. I said, yeah, because it's We Lego Batman, because he's not, right? And I was like, okay, this is dumb. Coming out of school. Um, they
Oh,
they made
man.
us, pay for psychologist sessions, to have a
Oh,
psychologist talk to him to confirm he was
good
not violent. The psychologist is a great guy, this kinda Idaho cowboy, and he said, "Look, there's nothing wrong with your son." He said, "He's a little special." He said, "It's what they're calling these days, um, gifted." I think now, if it happened, they might say he's on the spectrum. Like the language has changed a little bit in the last 10
Mhm.
years. So they said, he's really good at grasping a whole system simultaneously, but he's a little brittle, so he has a very over kind of wrought sense of justice. If he thinks things are unfair, he'll overreact. I was like, oh yeah, that's my son. So
Yep.
so that's the main character in this book. So this story is about
Uh,
basically my son at the age of like 8. Um, except in the book, this kid, because he won't stop imagining things about animals. Like we see him and he's devising a hieroglyphic alphabet for cows using hoof prints in class. And and but his mom, his single mom, can't afford, like conventional medical treatment. So the school district counselor says, "Look, I've actually just gotten my degree in hypnotherapy. How about if I hypnotize him?" This is obviously fiction, right? So the guy hypnotizes. Character's name is Jake. Jake comes out of it with the power to understand the speech of animals. So in the story, he teams up with the class's um pet monkey, and they sort of fight. It's a superhero story, but there's a tension between them. Which one of them is the hero and which one is the sidekick? because the monkey sees himself as an aristocrat. He calls himself Sir Horace. Um, and and the class zebra tarantula is stolen, and so they're trying to solve the mystery, and head off the disaster, because the tarantula has been stolen to be used in a kind of a crime. um,
Mm.
so that book exists. It's never been published, and if I'm not writing the sequel to the Wilding Probate, so either I'm going to be writing this like young adult thriller set up in uh, the borders of Idaho and Oregon, or I'm going to be writing this superhero middle grade story about a boy and his monkey partner fighting an evil iguana in elementary school. I'm going to write one of those two sequels in September.
I love it.
Yeah,
Evil
Uh,
iguanas, I like that.
either one would have my vote.
yeah.
They
Absolutely.
both sound really really
Absolutely.
cool.
Thank
Well, Roger, I think you have the next question.
Yeah. So, Dave, every writer has their own process. Can you walk us through yours?
you. Yeah. Um, man, for 2.5 years, I wrote full time, which was great. Well, what a luxurious life. Okay, got up, maybe dealt with the kids in the morning. Maybe my wife did. Had a page count every day. Hit it before noon, no problem. Whether it was 8 pages for a middle grade book, or 10 for a an adult novel, or 15 for an epic fantasy, I'd knock out my page count by noon. Then I would exercise, run some errands, go do the social media stuff. I had time to be on all the social media platforms. I was on Facebook, and I was on Twitter, and I had a blog, and I was on G plus. Okay, and great. And I just steadily put out books. Then I had to get back to making a living again. And so my
Mm.
process now is I do other things besides write for several months. Okay. And then I have like some time where I go, okay, in this time, in this 3 weeks, I'm going to do nothing but write this novel. I'll do work if I have to, but like all of my time, I'm just going to be focused, and I'm going to produce this novel. And I do. That is my process. I work in fits and starts. Um, I can kind of put out 2 books a year that way. It is not ideal. I look forward to getting back to the sedate middle class, making a living by writing, so I can just get up and do nothing but write every day, process. It's much healthier.
How did you develop your skills as a writer, or did you did you just start writing and then you get better and better as as each book novel comes out, or what? How does it happen?
And that's it. Is you have to write a lot. And the thing is that all of the professions I have been in, they're either writing professions, or they're speaking professions, or they're both. So I spent 11 and a half years or 12 years as a lawyer, but it was a lawyer who wrote documents all the time. And I wrote and rewrote and negotiated and argued over the meaning of contracts. And I wrote and rewrote and edited and argued it over the meaning of prospectuses describing businesses, right? And interviewed people to sort of figure out exactly what the thing was that I had to accurately describe in the real world to make sure nobody could get sued. And I wrote and rewrote and edited and negotiated corporate governance documents, and sales documents. And so, as a lawyer, I was a writer, and as an editor, I'm a
Mhm.
writer. And when I was practicing law, I was also writing in my spare time. And I wasn't really writing novels then. Was writing a few spec scripts for Hollywood that never went anywhere. But I was also writing songs, dozens of songs. I got into home recording, and I'd write songs. The first year I bought a recording studio, I recorded a Christmas album for all of my nieces and nephews. It was called "Stop Singing, Crazy Uncle Dave," and I drew a picture on the cover of like a guy in overalls, with his head was just eye stalks, and he was picking a banjo, singing to flower pots that had just eye stalks coming out of them. Right, this was the cover of the
Yeah.
album. and I wrote a song for every one of my nieces and nephews who was alive at the time, right? And so you just this is the thing, right? Is I don't feel like I know people who sort of say, well, I encountered writing, it was a craft I can do, it's a way I can make money. That's not my thing. I have felt compelled to write. And when I can't write books, um, I am thinking about writing books. I'm looking forward to writing the book and jotting down notes for writing the next book.
Mhm.
And yeah, how do you get better over time? Is you do it. You do it a lot. You read other people's writing to realize, and you think about the writing. What is good about this writing? Why do I like this? Why does this resonate with me? And you get edited, and editing is tricky, and I hate it. I hate getting editorial comments. I never like it. I never look at the letter immediately when I get it. I like put it in the corner and put it off for a week because it hurts my feelings. I don't like being edited. But the truth is, some of the best improvement I have made as a writer, I've got some dumb comments from editors, of course, but like also some of the most improvement I've made as a writer came from editors, and sometimes it wasn't even so. So one of the big moments of writing development for me was when Toni Weisskopf acquired my novel Witchy Eye, and she gave me one comment. She said, "This needs to be shorter." That was the whole comment. She didn't say take out that or strike this thing. She just said it needs to be shorter, right? I had to figure it out. So
Mhm.
I didn't want to delete any characters. I didn't want to remove any scenes or plots. So I said, well, how much can I cut out of this novel if I just go through and look for words and statements and thoughts that are redundant? If I really trust my reader to get what I'm saying, how much can I cut out? And the book was 240,000 words long. And when I
Wow.
gave it back to her, it was 205. I cut 35,000 words. I cut out a short novel worth of words. I did not remove a single scene.
Wow.
I didn't remove a character. I just found that, like, man, one word, two word here, a sentence there, you know,
Yeah.
I could massively lean out the way I wrote. And so you learn by doing, and you learn by getting guidance. And it's all hard and painful, but you become better, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
is.
it
It is.
is. Mm.
Well, Dave, we're about to wrap up. So, could you tell our listeners and viewers out there where they can find out more about you and your books?
Yeah. I have a website, man. I have not updated it in a couple of years, but it's got a bunch of my stuff listed on it. davidjohnbutler.com. Where you can find me active is on X, formerly known as Twitter. My user handle or username is David John Butler. That's John John, David John Butler. Again, I'm pretty active there all the time. If you are a Discord user, I've got a very active Discord server. And as long as you're not one of a small number of people I'd rather not admit there, come interact with me on X. And I'm happy to let you into my Discord server. There's a couple of hundred writers hang out there all the they mostly do. It's my Discord server. They mostly don't talk about me. They talk about the writing work they're doing and their publishing efforts and stuff, which is great. This is great. I happen to just be there. So anyway, come find me on X. That's the
Sure.
answer. And this can lead you to the other places.
Well, we'll make sure to follow you on X then.
Yeah. And we'll get that in the show notes for you. And we just want to thank you for taking the time to join us again today. We have had a great time talking with you and hearing about your creative journey.
Well, it was fun to meet you in at LibertyCon. I hope I'll see you there again. I don't know if I'll
Yeah.
see you at DragonCon, but
We got tickets.
okay.
Yeah.
I got tickets for next year for LibertyCon. Uh, awesome.
We were right there,
At
waiting for it to
noon, we
drop.
You have to do that. You have to put it in your calendar and say, if I don't get tickets in the 35 minutes or whatever, I'm just
Yep.
gonna go.
Yep.
Um,
Uh,
Perfect. So I'll see you there next time. It
yeah.
was fun to meet you there, and thanks for having me on, tonight. Really appreciate it.
And thank you to all our listeners out there in the greater world and viewers on YouTube and various other channels. And this is the Spaceman for the Halfling and the Spaceman podcast. Over and out.